fellow was supposed to address ICT issues.
I just wanted to ask you what is the understanding of
He's a lawyer. I know him.
The name is Comendia.
He's a lawyer.
But he came on ICT.
Yeah. So mimi nilikuwa nangoja tuongee mambo ya saba.
That's what I wanted to ask you. What's the role of the saba?
He looked to be anyway. He looked to be a deep sea holding brief.
I don't want association.
Yeah.
How many? So that one we didn't get the right.
No. Give it a minute.
And hiyo ya ICT ilizama.
Anaongea tu mambo ya.
Yeah, he was a
maybe
appears to be a UDI.
Yes.
No, he did. He also didn't speak to any UDI.
Yeah.
The only problem he was off topic.
Yeah.
He was put on a topic in this
I had a question, but people was advised by the members of the committee.
I think we shall proceed. We shall proceed in the best interest of time. If you are okay with that, the COG. I'm waiting for the chair to sign the document. Then you can proceed. And by way of introduction, I don't think you need any introduction on our part. I'm sure you know Honorable Senator Cheriot, the leader of majority in the Senate. I'm sure you know your colleague, Governor High Excellency Cecil Mbarire of Embu County. You know Senator Emeritus Honorable Omar of Yala. Okay? And my name is Opio Wandai. And Honorable Amina Mnyazi all the way from Malindi. Honorable Kimani Chungwa is just joining us. Okay, he's here. He will speak for himself.
Kimani Chungwa, Member of Parliament Kikuyu, co-chair.
Let's proceed. The floor is yours, the COG. And we have only 20 minutes. The excelling.
Thank you, co-chairs. This is the COG. I will request my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Chair, may I request that I be given the folder? I don't have a copy.
Okay, and to make it, I don't Chair, if I'd request if COG Chair can follow cue from you
And just introduce
her quickly. Let's save on time.
We'll save time, yeah. In any case, we know them.
Governor Lusaka can do that. Introduce everybody.
Governor Godana Tanariva.
Thank you.
Governor Timami Lamu.
Sante.
Governor Lusaka, Bungoma Speaker Emeritus.
Senator Lusaka.
Governor Ahmed Abdullahi, Wajir County and Vice Chair of Council.
Okay.
Mutula Kiloza Jr., Makwani Chair, Legal Affairs.
Senator.
Stephen Sang, Governor Nandi, Whip COG.
So how many senators? 1, 2.
Okay, Chairperson, Sergeant Otam.
Anne Waigoro, Chair, COG. And behind me is also the Secretariat for COG, led by Madam Mary Mwiti, who's the CEO.
We have been joined by Honorable Eugene Mamadu. I'm sure you know him.
Chair, just before we start, allow me to let you know that the chair and her team have been re-elected for another 1 year in office. So I want to take this opportunity to congratulate them on their re-election. Well done.
Thank you very much, and congrats from us.
Thank you, Governor Cicely, and thank you, team.
Yes, please proceed. Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you. This is a submission from the Council of Governors in recognition of the fact that the sovereign power of the state is exercised at 2 levels of government. That is the national government and the county governments, whose distinctness is recognized by Article 6.2 of the Constitution.
Maybe, Governor, to guide you, to save on time, you have 20 minutes. Don't take us through the whole write-up.
Don't worry.
Just do highlights.
It is it's very basic. Taking into cognizance the establishment of the National Dialogue Committee to foster productive dialogue and consensus building in adherence to the Constitution and laws of the Republic of Kenya. We note that the committee will recommend suitable constitutional legal policy reforms concerning the matters of significance to the devolved system of governance and to the people of Kenya. In view of the foregoing, the Council of Governors, on behalf of 47 county governments, makes the following proposals. Number one, on boundaries delimitations, the Council notes that the process of the review of boundaries is due, latest March 2024, which is the 12-year outer limit required by Article 89(2) of the Constitution, and the continued delay in the Constitution of the IEBC, the body mandated under the Constitution to review the boundaries of the electoral units, is most unfortunate. We therefore call upon the committee leaders and political actors to have a chance, to give a chance to the selection panel to complete the exercise. We also call on Parliament to provide the required budgetary allocation to IEBC so that there are no further delays. And further, we urge that Parliament fast tracks the enactment of the County Boundaries Bill to provide for the legal framework for the review of the same. On B, proposed devolution-related issues for consideration by the committee. The Council proposes the following issues, which will go a milestone in the implementation of devolution for consideration by the committee. Number one, funding and periodic costing of the national and county functions. Pursuant to Article 216 of the Constitution, the Commission on Revenue Allocation is established to make recommendations concerning the basis for the equitable sharing of revenue raised by the national government between the national and county government. The Council of Governors is proposing that the National Treasury and the Controller of Budget be assigned the responsibility of periodically costing national and county functions to determine the basis for equitable sharing of revenue every 5 years. We also recommend development of a policy to guide the periodic costing of all national and county functions. And we further propose transfer of resources of county functions that have been transferred, which resources are still being held at the national government. Number two, complete transfer of functions from the national government to counties. The Council of Governors is appreciative of the functions that have already been devolved, but is asking that the remaining functions that are still outstanding and still being held at the national government to be transferred to the county. In addition, this will include restructuring or winding up of parastatals that carry out county government functions, and these parastatals have employed staff, whereas counties also have the staff performing the same functions, leading to not only duplication but wastage of resources. The Council further recommends that all laws developed under the promulgation of the Constitution and after that clawback on devolution should be repealed, and we have attached a comprehensive list of all the sectoral laws that claw back on devolution. Additionally, we recommend the development of legal notices revoking previous legal notices delineating the county and national government functions. Number three, increase of the equitable share of revenue for the county governments to 45%. Articles 203(2) and 3 of the Constitution stipulate that for every financial year, the equitable share of the revenue raised nationally that is allocated to county governments shall not be less than 15% of all revenue collected by the national government, calculated on the basis of the most recent audited accounts of revenue received. The Council recommends an amendment to Article 203(2) and 3 of the Constitution to the effect that every financial year, the equitable share of revenue allocated to county governments shall not be less than 45% of the previous year's revenue collected by the national government and calculated on the basis of declared national exchequer accounts. And we have given details of how we've come up with that. Number four, borrowing powers by the county governments. We recognize that Article 212 of the Constitution allows the county government to borrow only if the national government guarantees the loan and the same is approved by the county assembly. The public finance management sets the debt ceiling for the country. While we note that the policy direction and the global best practice is to have a debt anchor as a percentage of gross domestic product, in present value terms as opposed to existing debt ceiling of 10 trillion, there is need to ensure that borrowing by the national government does not prejudice borrowing by the county governments. Over time, the stock of public debt has been used to deny counties their share of revenue, with counties not having contributed to its increase. This is therefore to ring-fence an amount for borrowing by county governments and also ensure the process is approved by the Senate as a representative of county governments. We therefore recommend an amendment to Article 212 of the Constitution to provide that 20% of the debt ceiling is ring-fenced for county borrowing. Number 5, the National Treasury. The Council of Governors proposes that the National Treasury shall be established as an independent institution separate from the Ministry of Finance in order to effectively serve both levels of government. With this, there shall be 2 IFMI systems, one designated for the national government and the other for the county governments. And in view of the devolution of services, we propose that the approval of withdrawals from the County Revenue Fund by the Controller of Budget be at the county or regional COB offices level and not the national office level, as the case at this point in time. Number 6, anchoring and resourcing the intergovernmental relations structures into law. Article 189 of the Constitution provides for the cooperation between national and county governments. However, it fails to anchor the necessary intergovernmental institutions established under the Intergovernmental Relations Act number 2 of 2012, which facilitates consultation between the 2 levels. We therefore recommend the anchorage of the national and county government coordinating summit, which is the apex body for intergovernmental relations between the 2 levels of government and in 2 levels of government in the Constitution. We also propose the anchorage and sufficient financing of the Council of County Governors Secretariats as a body fostering intergovernmental relations between the 47 county governments under the Intergovernmental Relations Act. Number 7, on safety and security. The Council recognizes that the Constitution clearly states that security is a national government function and should be carried out by national government officers. However, in the expanded definition of national security, most of the functions that are performed by county governments respond directly to attainment of national security. National security infrastructure, such as police stations, police facilities, amongst others, are hosted within the counties, and any disruption would affect the functioning of counties as well as national security. Critical infrastructure, the counties including transport, logistics system, water, communication, oil storage, electricity and gas reticulation facilities are important as they also contribute to national security. The exclusion of the county governments in the national security process may have been overlooked in the enactment of the Constitution 2010. The Council therefore recommends the amendment of Article 240 of the Constitution, which establishes the National Security Council to provide for the representation of the county governments through one of the county governors, and we further propose for the establishment of a county security council at the county level to be presided over by the recommends that the national government releases funds to counties to support the county policing authorities, which are key structures of the counties on matters security. This is pursuant to Section 41 of the National Police Service Act. Number 8, on impeachment of governors and deputies. The Council proposes changes to the process of impeachment of county governors to prohibit any impeachments within a period of 24 months after their election into office and 12 months towards the next general election. This will mirror the petition for recall of the members of Parliament as provided under Section 45 of the Election Act and enable sufficient time for governors to set up the administration for purposes of service delivery. And number 9, and finally, consideration of legislation concerning county governments. The Senate represents counties and serves to protect the interests of the counties and their governments under Article 96(1) of the Constitution. The Council proposes that the mandate of the Senate in considering, debating, and approving bills concerning counties should be expanded beyond the provisions of Article 110(1), as all the bills passed by Parliament concern the county government. I submit, co-chairs.
Thank you very much, the COG chair.
And I'm sure I did not even get 15
No,
minutes.
you did very well.
You have done very well.
You did exceptionally well, and we must congratulate you. No wonder you have been re-elected as the chair of COG. Now, we shall open the floor, but I'll start with Senator Aaron Cheriot if he has any issue. He mentioned to me that he wants to go somewhere.
Without starting with the last issue.
Which one? Thank
You
you.
go on, turn on.
Oh, 110-1. Yeah. In fact, I was wondering whether it's a bribe to me. They mentioned. Anyway, Chair, just a comment on item 4 on borrowing by powers by the county government. Listen to the very interesting proposal from COG. Makes sense to me. The challenge, of course, has been how to ring fence what they want us to ring fence. It will interest them to know that presently we are actually doing the mediation on this particular bill because the National Assembly and the Senate disagreed on how it's to be handled. I wish they would have been more elaborate on how this proposal to ring fence will work, because in your presentation, Chair, just says this is therefore to ring fence an amount for borrowing by county governments and also ensure the process is approved by the Senate as representatives of the county. Please, if you could take time to expand on that, I'd really appreciate, as this is such a good opportunity while you do those discussions. Just as a comment out of that, Speaker, this issue of debt by counties is something that worries me, though, because I have a report on my chair, on my desk. So
Let's give Governor Mwadime a seat, please. Karibu, Mheshimiwa.
Okay, good. I was saying, Chair, I have a report on my desk on expenditure by county governments, Regulation 25, and the violation which affects, unfortunately, 47 out of 47. All of you that are here, including says on to my right, that not a single county is dedicating the threshold of 30% to development. The figure is actually dropping due to the same mistakes that were made by the national government. We are beginning to see it in counties. Growing size of recurrent and shrinking in development vote. The reason I asked that question in line with your borrowing policy is that how national government got us into the mess that we are in today as a country is inability to manage your expenses, and because you have political promises to keep, you go and borrow to appear as if you're doing something and you're not prudently managing your finances. If we open this window, what is the assurance that we get from you, Chair, and your members, that there is something that you're doing at governor's level to try and comply with that regulation? And like I mentioned, the report from COB on 21-22 and 22-23, the financial year that we've just closed, shows a decline in almost all the counties, which is a worrying trend, because counties are about to go the same direction national government went.
Thank you very much, Chair. Please just answer Honorable Cheriot, then you can proceed after that, yeah, with the rest of the questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I will answer briefly, and then I will give my colleague, Vice Chair, to also chip in. I'll start with the issue of how do we intend to ring fence. Borrowing is a normal part of every government financial process. There is no government in the world that doesn't have a debt. I think what it is that jeopardizes any country is the extent to which you borrow. Many of them measure borrowing on the basis of their GDP. This country recently have resulted to cap our limits and not deal with the GDP issues for reasons, I guess, as advised by the National Treasury, who are the ones responsible for monetary and economic policy. Now, what we're saying is this. When counties make requests for resources to carry out our functions, year on, what happens is that we are usually given the excuse that the reason we cannot increase your resources to be able to do the functions that you're asking is because this is the only amount we have, because we are having to borrow this much to pay our debt. Now, every budget making process considers two items to fund the budget. One is revenue, the other one is the borrowing to fund the gap. Because in every government, development projects will always exceed the amount of revenue that the country has, and that is why they end up with a gap in borrowing. As I said, the issue is to rationalize what it is that you prioritize as your projects so that you're able to finance your budget. So the borrowing then shouldn't be to the extent that it is in many countries that are in debt distress. Now, what we are saying, since that is the logic that is used for county governments to be denied their revenue, then we should apply the same, that we are given the same space for both the allocation from the revenue, which is what we usually get, and we are saying as a percentage of the revenue that has been raised in the previous year, and we are proposing in this case 45%. And then, considering what the national government is borrowing, the county government should also be given the same window of 20% to fund their budget deficits for their development projects. So in essence, it's just what we're saying is that whatever you're applying at the national level, you should also apply the same principles at the county level. Now, to address the second question of why is it that the counties have a problem with adhering to the stipulated or recommended 30% by the PFM with regard to recurrent expenditure versus development. One of the reasons that our recurrent expenditure grows is human resource expenses, which have to do with the staff that we have in the counties. Now, we got functions that were devolved, and with it came human resource. We also found human resource of the counties from the county authorities. Now, the challenge, like in this past financial year, if I could explain, the amount of money that the counties were given in additional revenue was less for most counties than that which would be required to just factor in basic requirements of law in terms of increases of salary, annual increases of salaries. And we raised it when we were coming to the Senate to look for the resources. So of course, if you do that 2-3 times, you will find that all counties then will end up spending a lot more than the 30%. So it is the only way to get the counties to have their 30% or less in recurrent expenditure, especially in human resource, is to increase the allocation that you're giving to the counties. But if you keep the allocation at a lower pace than the increase in recurrent expenditure, both when you factor inflation and they factor increased taxes, like right now we have increased taxes, and then you factor increased salary increment but that are mandatory by law, you will find that over the years, the cost of recurrent expenditure for counties will exceed the 30% threshold.
Chair, maybe before you give, and maybe he could also help you, because I know he's a finance person, because from your answer, what you are saying is actually not factual. You have said that what has been used to deny counties more revenue is how much government is borrowing. Well, the excuse that you may put it.
That is the excuse that the national government gives us when they are doing the current.
And I'm saying because your vice chair is a finance person, he knows that is not factual. What is factual is that is not borrowing, is debt financing. And it is also a fact, the Controller of Budget just released a report last week, but one, saying that we have now surpassed the 1 trillion mark in debt financing. And that is what has a bearing as to how much money then is available to the counties. The other thing that is factual, true, the cost of living is going up and inflation and all that, and wages will definitely go up. And I would want to hear from you, where is a place for own source revenue for county governments? Because we are now all competing for resources at the center, but we never hear any governor or even the council speak about own source revenue and I believe the spirit of devolution was also to encourage counties even to compete amongst themselves in raising revenue. Part of the other reason, Governor, Chairperson, why counties are finding themselves in problems is unrealistic estimates of your own source of revenue, and you end up with very many pending bills. I'll give you a case example of a county that I know that the last financial year they raised about 2.1 billion shillings, and they have now estimated for the next financial year that they will raise 7.9 billion. And they will go ahead and procure and incur pending bills. Then that drives the demand for more resources more than probably the other issues of inflation and all that. Because if you have to factor in inflation, the other thing that is factual, and I say this with all due respect to the council because I have sat in parliament as a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Part of what is factored, and I'm certain even Senator Aaron or Senator Mugani would have bear me witness, the cost of inflation is always factored. Always.
Yeah.
So that's why I challenge you that on that particular aspect, what you are telling us is not factual.
I actually beg to differ, because you know very well that as much as we raise revenue in the country, sometimes we also borrow to pay debts. We borrow from A to pay B, or we roll over our maturities and use maybe domestic and convert one borrowing to pay another debt, and that happens, and it is normal in all counties. So I think we can't assume, if you look at how much money that the country collects vis-a-vis how much money that we're spending in development and how much we're paying in debt, you will see that what I'm telling you is factual. The second thing is, even in the national government, they have never achieved 100% of their revenue collection target. Half the time, and I come from a background of Treasury, I was there for over 15 years. In all those 15 years, or over 15 years I was there was no day we said we had achieved 100% of our revenue target. We always get to, in fact, if you get to 85, 90%, it's considered a very good performance. So it is not unusual also to find the same in the country, in the county governments. And I have said on the issue, this I've said before in Senate, I think one of the things that would cure our pending bills, and pending bills, Chair, does not only apply to county governments. Whereas county governments have a fraction of pending bills, I think our total pending bills are about 115 billion shillings. And out of that, you will find that one county will probably have 90, and the rest then have the spread of the little. And the largest bearer of the pending bills is the city of Nairobi, because of the previous local authorities and also the previous regimes. You will find that the national government's pending bills are in excess of 400 billion. So when we talk about pending bills and we talk about this financial management, let us be careful not to cast aspersions on the county governments at the expense or at the detriment of the expense of our reputation vis-a-vis the national, because Chair, some of us have the facts, and we will also respond with the facts. Thank you.
Vice Chair. Thank you very much to chairs. Issues raised, just add a few things. With all due respect, whether we call it debt financing or debt, it's our feeling that the national government is front-loading its share through debt. In that, when they borrow upfront and spend more on repaying debt, and when you come to the division of revenue, debt is used to explain why we can't get money, it's not fair. If you just even look at the current revenue share formula in the Constitution has provided a ceiling of 15% as counties' percentage of shareable revenue. It would have made sense for us to have a law in place to say, even with respect to the fiscal space, national government can only use up to 85% because they ought to pay their debts from the revenue share that they have, which is 85%. So now they are using the entire fiscal space for borrowing, and that doesn't leave counties with anything. A framework was suggested that says counties can borrow up to 20% of their equitable share. I think that's too low. It should be pegged on the available amount to be borrowed. The space that there is. I'll leave borrowing at that. Coming to the issue of recurrent expenditure, I think Chair has explained this has to do with the fact that expenditure is outgrowing revenue for counties. Every year we go to we go through a very intense DORA negotiations, division of revenue negotiations, where CRA comes up with numbers, and the National Treasury and the National Executive then take it upon themselves to decide what to give to counties. So we go through all these protectory negotiations, and at the end of the day, it is, take it or leave it in a sense. And if we don't get the support of the Houses of Parliament to actually increase the share, we're left high and dry. This is what has been happening. Then we'll end up with a situation where the growth in our expenditure, in our establishment cost, operating cost, every single year outweighs the increase in the equitable share. 2, development begets more expenditure. The more dispensaries we construct, for instance, or the more water wells we drill, the more we have to employ people to operationalize those, and then up goes our establishment cost. I think these are some of the things that drive this. And then the extraneous factors. We are out of a drought situation. When I took up office this term, if I started building anything, I'll be insulted on radio and I'll be cursed. Why? Because people are dying of hunger. I had to divert money from development to keep people alive. And that was in many counties, a lot of the ASAL counties actually. So the solution then is give us more money. And how do you give us more money? Just let's be true to the constitutional requirement that resources follow functions. We're not asking for resources outside of what is available to do devolved functions. If there's money at Afia House that's for primary health care, give it to us. If there's money at Maji House that's available to do ponds and water wells, give it to us. That way, we'll have dealt with that issue. On source revenue, I want to dissuade ourselves from this notion that counties ought to be funded from on-source revenue. It's not the case. Because at the time that we adopted this constitutional framework, the functions counties are doing were already being funded from the National Exchequer. Health was being funded from National Exchequer. Agriculture was being funded. And Article 209 has not given counties a lot of powers to actually collect revenues. Our mandate is pretty much limited to land rates and entertainment, taxes, alcohol,
cemeteries,
and user levies, for collecting garbage bins. I mean, you don't raise a lot of money from that, surely. So much as we are trying to actually increase that, and counties are not equally endowed in raising revenue. The amount that Nairobi will collect in say, land rates, you wouldn't get that from Wajir or Mandera or Taita Taveta. So let's be real. Just give us what is due to us.
Okay, Governor, on this particular subject, we may debate until the cows come home. And if you read Article 203 of the Constitution, sub-article 1B on the criteria, not national interest, the second one, because I heard Governor Igoro whisper that excuses, not reasons. It's actually a constitutional provision, and your chair legal knows that any provision must be made in respect to all the public debt and other national obligations. Therefore, that's a subject of discussion. As I say, that we can debate until, including whether counties have contributed to the rise of public debt. And Governor Igoro rightly put it, just as you say about, speak about pending bills, it is also factual that part of this public debt is debt that came from the defunct local authorities. Again, Nairobi County being top among those counties. I want to move you to your first issue on the reconstitution of IBC and boundaries delimitation. And on page 2, and you are asking, you therefore call upon the committee leaders and political workers to give a chance to the selection panel to complete the exercise of composition of IBC within the stipulated timelines to undertake this important exercise. Just a direct question, is that to say that you support the selection panel as established under the IBC Amendment Act of 2022 or 2023 to continue with its work and complete that process and through that selection model of a panel?
I will ask Governor.
Can they take a few then?
Yeah, maybe you can take, you'll answer that one.
You can take a few, then you respond, Chair.
Omalwa, then Omar.
Yes, I think on that same point, on page 3 of your presentation, I think apart from the reconstitution of IEBC, you're also urging Parliament to fast track the enactment of the County Boundaries Bill. I think this is before the Senate, as we were told, so that they're able to execute their work under Article 188 of the Constitution. But according to you, you're saying that this will help address the continued disputes between the county governments on their boundaries and the shared resources. But there's another issue that is before this committee. It's not just the disputes on the boundaries, but it is creation of new counties. So far, I think there are proposals for almost over 10 counties. I think looking at some of you here, you are affected by that proposal. I think Wajir Governor, a team from Wajir came. Governor Bungoma, there's a team from Bungoma. And about 10 of you are affected by that. We wanted to know your views on this issue. And probably if you have been consulted as the governors of the affected counties and what you think this committee should recommend, because there's also the danger of having a Pandora's box opened, where every community would want their own county, and you are the wearers of the shoes. Would be very happy to hear from you over that. The other issue, of course, you have proposed increment from, I think, up to 45%. I think there had been a BBI proposal that had gone through, I think, most of your county assemblies. And I think there had been some build-up of consensus around 35%. But your proposal is actually beyond that. You're looking at 45%. I think it'll be good to hear your justification on that. Though as your former minister, I would really support, in fact, the more resources to the counties. I think you are shouldering the greatest responsibilities in terms of the Big Four. You are the ones on the ground actually carrying everything. And would like to see that process that is ongoing of ensuring that all the vote functions come to you, and of course resources follow the functions. I think that is a very interesting proposal. Would like to hear more about the justification. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine would just be one or two issues that were raised, following up on what Eugene has said. when you are like a counterpart, axis of devolution. The MCAs were here. They want us to create a World Development Fund. We want to hear your opinions about it. Secondly, there's a lot of allegations about the independence of county assemblies. So I also want to get a bit of your view about what you think about these issues on financial autonomy, particularly of county assemblies. Thirdly, that these 27 or so counties that are, or 20 members of parliament who have been here without pointing any fingers, talk about the inclusivity issue. They say the reason they're asking for their little enclaves is because some of you as governors have deliberately marginalized them in your own counties. So as you build an inclusivity question or conversation in Nairobi at the national government, is the county, the COG trying in its own regard also to build an inclusivity discussion or discourse internally, or even in terms of peer mentoring, that there's a lot of allegations of nepotism, clanism, tribalism. So these small little groups are saying, when you are a governor from clan X, you exclude clan Y. And the last one, of these amendments you have proposed, are there any that require a referendum?
Okay, it's quite a mouthful from us, but I will ask a final one, hopefully. On your recommendation to have the equitable share or revenue increase from 15% to 45%, I just want to get some comfort from you. The basis for this, because in the past we've had controversy around the costing of these functions. So is this based on some scientific costing of the functions that would therefore demand this kind of equitable share of revenue? Because for me, I support more and more money going to the counties, but I want to be given some comfort that is scientifically arrived at. And I can also see you are saying that in that new scheme of things, the least county should get is 6 billion. You have to be sure that that is supported by some science. Two, and finally, is the issue of the MCAs. You know, MCAs are an integral part of the county government management, if I may call it so, for lack of a better word. There's been an outcry that the MCAs are very poorly remunerated, and this affecting their work in terms of oversight, legislation, and representation. I'm sure when the MCAs are uncomfortable, the county government work is also affected. So do you support the idea that the remuneration of MCAs should be addressed by way of enhancing it, okay, so as to make the work of the county governments more effective and efficient? Thank you.
All right. I will request my colleagues to chip in on their responses. The boundaries, one, will be handled by the legal governors amongst us, Governor Bungoma and the team.
Sergeant Ottans, maybe you can add mics instead of passing around, but I see Mutula has one in front of him.
Yeah.
And maybe at the same time you could just allow whoever is capable answering
Yes.
the question just to
Yeah.
shoot. Yes.
Excellent. I think I will just start off on summary and the last question of the county assemblies, because I've been on it for a while. I think in general, if you look at the disparities in terms of the salaries, you will understand where they're coming from. One, anyone who understands the politics of this country and the way their jobs were assessed by the SRC, you will know that they're, especially for you who are legislators, you'll know that the work of a legislator is not what is written on the terms of reference of a member of parliament. It's written oversight, representation, but you know, when you go to the ground, there's a lot more that you have to handle because of our culture and our society. No one will understand why a legislator cannot give or contribute to a funeral, or will not attend, or will not take care of, from your pocket, bursary and demands for healthcare. And it's the same thing for the members of the county assemblies. The other thing is that already Senate has provided for them an increased ceiling. But what has happened is that in the review of all the other cadres within the county governments, our county secretaries got more money, our county CCs got an increase, but the county assembly and the speakers got an increase, but the MCAs never got an increase, but they got an increase in their ceilings. So they have a ceiling, but they cannot spend. So they can actually get a little increase within the ceiling that is already provided by Senate without affecting the overall budget. Thanks.
Governor, maybe you'd have answered together with that question on the position of the Council of Governors on the financial autonomy of county assemblies and Ward Development Fund.
Okay, I'm going to answer the Ward Development Fund. Sorry. I think there's a genuine concern by the members of the county assemblies to ring-fence some Ward Development Fund. And the fear has been, because I've also been around for some time, the fear has been that sometimes development is best left to the whims of the governor who is there. So that if an MCA stands up and doesn't like the governor, or the governor doesn't like the MCA, then you just dictate that there will be no money going to that area for development. So as a council, we are proposing that out of the development fund, we ring-fence up to 5% of what has been allocated to go to the ward. That will ensure that every ward gets its share of development, irrespective of whether you agree or belong to the same political formation with the governor or not. The financial autonomy, in fact, again, is very good for us. We've already supported it. We want the county assemblies to have their own autonomy in terms of finance. It will get out of us, because again, it becomes sometimes a big challenge where they feel maybe the governor is sabotaging what they want to do. So we want them to manage their own funds. Therefore, as a council, the position is we support financial autonomy.
Mutula, Governor Mutula?
Yes.
On the legal questions?
Yes. One, let me just disclose that I participated in the 2016 law on the IEBC.
Oh yes, you did.
Yes, I was there. Now, for purposes of the COG, we didn't get into the details of who should or should not sit in the selection panel for obvious reasons. We in a bipartisan manner, we left that issue on the detail. What we have emphasized, that it is nearly tragic not to have a commission. It's nearly tragic to have half a commission like we were having, and therefore this matter must be resolved as quickly as possible, so that then whatever method that is used, the principle is in the law that you must have a selection panel. As to who sits in the panel, that we have left to you without getting into the detail. Why, if you, in the 2016 framework, and you know how we ended up in the selection panel, we ended up picking church leaders to pick IEBC, for example, and it was one term. So we have left the details to you, but we are emphasizing
but more so on the mode of selecting the new commissioners. Would you, as a council, support the selection panel route, or what was christened the IPPG, for instance, route, or what happens in other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth where the president unilaterally decides Governor Mutula is a good man, he can become a commissioner of IEBC, Kimani Ichung'wah cannot, Governor Igoro can, between those, because that's the debate really, which route to pursue, and from your reading, you are asking for a speedy resolution of that matter through the selection panel. That's what I wanted to confirm, whether you are supporting the selection panel.
We have stated, yes, about the selection panel.
Selection panel is your position.
Yes, and the reasons are, obvious. From our historical perspective from 1992, you don't want to reinvent history. It's there in the law, and facts.
Not political parties.
No, the details as to who sits in the selection panel, like in the case in UK, would be either political parties, etc. We didn't want to get into those details.
Okay.
Yeah, because then we didn't want to compromise the otherwise.
Sorry.
Yes.
But is it your position that the current selection panel continues with the work?
It's
not clear. Yeah.
So we avoided the question of current. We said selection panel. Not current.
We didn't want a political fight about it because people would hold different views. Just said, go with the method, but look for the detail. The detail is yours.
That's what
On the county boundaries. And the question...
We will read that to mean not necessarily the current panel, but a panel.
Yeah. Read it that
panel mode.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, on the question of the county boundaries, let me say this because I attempted, and majority leader, you are aware. Since 2013, I attempted to have the county boundaries bill.
Yeah.
Since 2013, I drafted three bills from 2017 to 2022. Chairman, although we don't have a brief from the council on the creation because we are not aware. We were not briefed on the creation, the proposed creation of the new counties. You can't even get there without determining the boundaries of counties. Because how will you split one county if you don't know where the boundary is? Yeah. But the contradiction is this, Chairman, that whilst constituencies are known, whilst wards are known, boundaries of counties appear ambiguous. So the delimitation is important so that you can resolve the question of county boundaries before you get to the question whether you will increase or reduce. Because the criteria of the 47 is already there in the 1992 District and Provinces Act. You don't have any other method. And in any event, Chairman, for that territory of Kenya, you have to do a referendum.
It is disputed, sorry.
What?
That criteria was disputed vehemently this morning by Mwingi people.
By
Mwingi, the people of Mwingi.
Your neighbors. My neighbors.
Yes.
Your neighbors
Is that when Makueni District
yes.
and Tarakaniti District were created way back in 1992 or thereabout, they were gazetted. And yet, Mwingi District was equally created at the same time but was not gazetted.
No.
That's how it missed out.
The position is this, that the last Attorney General, Amos Wako, is the person who came up with the District and Provinces Act. Any other gazette notice that came after that was not considered for purposes of constitutional making. That is a fact. And there are many other gazette notices that followed. But the correct position is that the 47 counties are anchored on the 1992 law, which was the compromise by the constitutional lawmakers. Thank you.
More emphatically, the COG is of the position
yes.
that you don't support an increment in the number of counties.
I'm saying, for purposes of our brief, the county boundaries now appear ambiguous. It is a contradiction to start talking about other things before you define the county boundaries.
We first fix the existing county boundaries before we even begin the question of delimiting.
Yes.
To new additional ones or reducing.
There is no baby, so where will you get the other baby from? It's a simple thing. The question of the independence of county assemblies has been addressed. The question asked by my good friend and twin brother, Senator Oman, on referendum, I will tell you. Number 8 and 9 on our document are covered under Article 255. They will require a referendum. Independence of county assemblies, I fought very hard when I was sitting in the budget committee to ensure that the county assemblies are given financial autonomy, which was done through a circular. What they're asking is an amendment to the PFM. And since, Chairman, you have been sitting in that committee, you know what they're talking about. Thank you.
And now that you're sitting in the Council of Governors, I hope you have praised the Council more on the provisions of Article 2 or 3.
Yeah, the one of 45% will be important to hear.
Is it 45%? The justification for the 45%.
That's what Governor Timami is.
And the minimum of 6 billion.
The justification for, in fact, at the time that we were proposing, in fact, at the BBI it was 40%. And in the calculation of the 40%, in fact, was costing of existing functions. Not even an increment, it's just the functions, the existing functions. If you cost the existing functions, you will even go to 40% straight without an increment. We're simply saying the funds have not followed the functions. And in this, we have gone out of our way, and I must say it, because This is a matter that I'm very passionate about. In the graph on page 6,
Is that why Governor says has taken over the work of the chair to allocate who is going to answer what?
it's possible.
And I was asking her on a light note, what side is she on?
Look at the graphs appearing on allocations. This is how to answer that question, and it also answers the question that Majority Leader talks about funding. If you look at the funding for counties in 2013, at the advent, it was at 64.7%. If you look at it currently, it is at 56.3%. If you look at, no, that is national. If you look at counties, it has reduced dramatically from 14 all the way, and it has been going up and down, up and down. This increment that you can see at national government, those 2013, those are actually county functions. That, yes, from 20 to 15%. You can see the graph in the blue line. The 4% here and the increment at national of more than 7% is actually money that should be going to counties. That is the scientific justification.
Governor, this green line, have you factored in public debt, national interest?
You and I were in
You have taken the wholesome share.
wholesome, but you and I were in Parliament when we were debating this public debt and increment of this debt from 6 trillion to 10 trillion. It was obvious at that time you would get to 10 trillion before the time that was specified by National Assembly in the Gazette notice, and it was going to affect the bottom line. So I agree with the Vice Chair. Whether you call it financing of debt or public debt, it's just talking about the chicken and the egg. It's the same thing.
But you remember we took the same position and we were ignored.
I know, but now you know what I was saying.
Cheers. And just to agree with my colleagues, I think what we are saying is that for us to sort out this aspect of the amount of resources between counties and national government is actually to do costing of actions. It's an exercise that has not been concluded for the last 10 years, up to and including this morning. Part of what we had as part of the agenda in the COG was to discuss intergovernmental, technical committee on unbundling of actions. And we clearly think that, I don't think that we have developed sufficient courage as a nation to confront this unbundling of functions. If we did that and costed functions, these percentages of 15, 30, the truth is, even if we were to ask ourselves, what was the basis of 15%? At that point, it could have been 25. It could have been 30. You can't really get a reason why it had to be 15%. And therefore, even as we push it to 45, it's on the basis of the experiences that we have had now. And we clearly can see that counties are underfunded. But if we wanted to be fair with everybody, let's just unbundle the functions, let us cost the functions, and let's release the monies. Maybe we would not even need to talk about percentages once we agree on unbundling of functions, costing, and functions follow, funds follow functions. So I think that is really where we are.
Has this been raised at IBEC?
Yes. Not just IBEC, at IBEC and at the summit continuously. But also, it's very good that this is coming from one side. At the end of the day, in these negotiations every year, the bigger obstacle in the division of revenue is actually the National Assembly. So some of these factors are understood by both the Senate, the National Assembly, National Treasury. I will tell you, and Aaron knows this. This year, we are getting 15.4%. Can you imagine 10 years down the line, the devolution way? We are still at, the Constitution talked about 15%. In fact, the allocation initially was 14.6. When we pointed out, there was an additional, I think, 5 billion that brought it just barely above 15%. It can't be that 10 years down the line, we are actually still operating at the very bare minimum.
I think that's a very dangerous situation.
Yes.
You are really on the brink. Now, do you feel the Senate is, as a defender of devolution, is defending you enough, because I think we were 385 and 407, and we were very surprised that some of your senators actually opposed.
And part of that is the reason why we think, if you look at also part of our presentation, we are saying that the Senate really needs to be given more
gravitas.
Gravity. And it's a part of this thing that, part of the reason why senators may end up agreeing on certain figures is because of the the reality that eventually the National Assembly's position will carry the day. Sometimes it's very frustrating to push. We have seen the senators push to 425. Eventually we know that it will end up at the position that the National Assembly takes. So really, if we can find an objective, arrangement around unbundling, costing, and then agree on that principle of resources follow functions, this should be able to settle the resources.
Thank you.
Through you.
Yeah, how I wish that the Honorable Ishoma was here to hear some.
Okay. I will convey the message to him. Just finally, Honorable Omar, let me conclude.
Just to conclude, as you answer.
You conclude.
Yeah,
my colleagues here wanted to say something.
Let's answer at once. After him, then we can.
Ultimately, to become a governor, you're a politician. So that doesn't, just the fact that you have a county government. But there is a question. I've seen your position on gender within your presentation. There's another insertion which talks about gender, which is very elaborate. I think we can pick from that. But I would really want to appreciate your position on the leader of official opposition. Your politicians of a certain gravitas. Leader of official opposition, PACS, and the constitutionalization of some of these other funds like NGAF, World Development Fund, and the CDF.
And I would just add one other issue you left out completely is the cost of living. And this is a major issue for this committee. We know that some of the counties have also drastically raised some taxes and levies. I think Nairobi to be in particular. But there are some of you governors who have been very sensitive to the suffering of Kenyans. And actually down there you have adjusted a bit. I think we want to appreciate those of you who have done that, because Kenyans are hurting. I would like to hear your views on that also. Whether some of these taxes, levies can be dropped. On fuel alone, we have like 16. Electricity, we have like 8. Well, what are your views on this? Thank you.
Leader Cheriot, it will be wrong if I don't respond. The Senate has been mentioned, and sometimes adversely as a leader of the House, it will be proper for me to respond. I think I hear the discussion, and I see what Eugene is trying to say about the division, for example, in the House, because it's been a very controversial issue, and I know what governors say. But I want to say that Senate relied on the wisdom of so many things. History, resources available. When I say history, for example, Chair, I know for a fact that we've held our ground sometimes in the past, and they've been stalemate. And 3-4 months down the line, because county governments haven't received a share, governors themselves have gone and said, what are you guys still fighting about? Can you release that money as it is? By COG itself, and it's on record. So sometimes you wonder how difficult it is to fight and whether it is worth the eventual fight together. And when you're seated at a table, because our members of our committee consult and say, so what is it that will be more comfortable and what is available? That's what eventually gets shared out. Chair, just as a final comment, there is something that I noted, which I really wish to plead with our governors to understand, because I got this from the conversation between the chair on our side and chair on their side, and I think a few of the governors when they spoke. We all love evolution. I certainly do, and I believe that we need to support them. We need to send far more resources to our counties than we already are doing. However, I'd wish to plead with our governors not to accept the demeanor that the national government accepted many years in the past, and hence we found ourselves in the situation. Because I saw when questions are raised our governors go on defense mode on many of these issues. When you say on-source revenue, you say, oh, on-source revenue is not supposed to fund counties. Yet we know for a fact that there are counties which, after changeover of administration, county governments are collecting almost double the amount that the previous administration used to collect in the same jurisdiction. And there are examples. Counties that used to report 400, 500, you now have a new governor in office, they're upwards of 600 and 700. Therefore, if it becomes the official position, as is being explained right now, that, you know, we cannot use it to fund operations in our counties, then even your own staff, they take that demeanor and say, anyway, it's just about funeral collections and I don't know what, yet it is a serious kitty. And the same could be said of pending bills that you spoke about and so many other pool resources. So I want to believe that much as we agree with you, your Vice Chair, that it is important to send additional resources to you, let the demeanor also change so that we know and appreciate that you also have learned from the very bad experience that our national government has set for all of us. We don't want counties to find themselves in that situation. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's now wind up, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to respond to Majority Leader Senate with like 3 sentences. Then I'll hand over to my colleague on my left. They've been wanting to say something on the other questions that have been overtaken. And then the Vice Chair will close on the response to your question, Honorable Amalwa, on the issue of the cost of living and all the questions that we apparently jumped. So, just to say, Chair, that yes, there are counties that have increased their revenue, some of them being some of the ones that some of us are running. But if you look at our revenue, the county of Kirinyaga, at our highest so far, we have collected 580 million. But we received in total about 5.2 billion. It used to be 4.2 for many years. And then about a year ago, now this is the second time we've gotten 5.2. And then a little from development partners. So you can see the amount of revenue and the amount required to run the county is less than 10%. And so the fact is our own source revenue was never meant to run the counties because the devolved system of governance in Kenya is not a completely devolved system. If it was, we would be collecting pay-as-you-earn at the counties, we would be collecting VAT, we would be collecting the housing levy at our level, and then applying that to running the county. That's how states run. And if you look at other countries with devolution, there is the mixed bit like our system, and then there is the absolute devolved system where you're completely autonomous, like even in other countries like Nigeria, where they collect the revenue and run their counties, and that's very different from what we have. So in that case, when my revenue maximum can only be about between 8 and 10% of the required revenue for the county, the national government has to supplement, and that is why there is a provision in the Constitution of a minimum of 15% allocation, and it's supposed to be a minimum, not a maximum. I'll ask my colleagues on my left to please chip in where we left off.
Honorable members of the committee, the issue of the minimum 6 billion revenue for counties. There are about 7-8 counties which are the small counties, not in size but in population. For example, Lamu, we are getting about 3 billion. My cost of doing development, because of the geography, everything is sourced out of Mombasa, then to transport it to Lamu and further on to the other islands. It's very, very expensive. Not only that, what has been said earlier, the staff cost. This year we have been hit with the 1.5% housing levy. That translates to nearly 100 million shillings, which the county has to pay. And these are counties that we didn't even have, and until today we don't have county headquarters. And it's really, if things continue the way they are, these counties will not be able to survive. It's not only the geography, poverty levels across the 7 or 8 counties are very high, and most importantly, we were also left behind for all those years until 2010. Development bypassed these counties. So for all these reasons, we believe, for example, Taita, with its landscape, and it's been going through a hard time with drought. I'm sure he's envious when he sees it's raining here. It's really becoming a challenge for us to run our counties.
Thank you.
So that's something we want you
So
to
Taita gets how much, Madimis?
We are almost just on the same tune, but it's about 4 billion. But you see the topology of the area and the way it is. That's why most of the time I'm agitating for 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 kilometer. Because right now, as it is, if we continue on the same trend, it will just be the same as Kenya and Singapore. We are at the same level. Other countries will move ahead, others will remain. Because we cannot do even a single project. As it is right now, you know, when we started 2013, the evolution was very good to all countries. Because they didn't have ECDs, we did them. Where I didn't have health centers, we did them. But alongside that, as time goes by, we had to engage staff. And where we are right now, if we just get the exchequer, from equitable share on a monthly basis, once we pay the staff, what remains, even buying medicine and doing these nitty-gritties. And mind you, some of us, we are placed logistically in a very difficult area. We are not like the governor of Nairobi, or let's say Mombasa, because if you call a meeting in Nairobi, and all the meetings are done either Nairobi or Mombasa, as we have to travel by road. And you know, when you are traveling by road, you have to carry all the security guards, you have to carry, it's a lot of expenses. So these are some of the issues, I think, nitty-gritties, which you should go really deep, so that these 8 counties, you should bail them out. At least minimum 6 billion, this one can do.
Apart from Lamu and Taita, the other one?
Tarakanidhi is one of them.
Okay.
Vihiga,
Yolo.
Okay, you give Marakwet.
Yeah.
M2, yes. Siolo.
Kuchas. Just 2 minutes of closing, but I'll give 1 minute to my whip and then.
Honorable members, 2 things. I think Senator Aaron, what you are saying is well noted, on source revenue. We are definitely pushing ourselves. Some counties are doing better, others are still not doing very good. That is an area that we have to focus. But you will also appreciate that some of the revenue streams that were available to local authorities are no longer available to county governments now. For example, SES. In Nandi County, for example, and I know it's the same for quite a number of the agricultural counties, SES used to form a big part of our own source revenue. Again, courtesy of legal changes, that is not available right now. So I think really, even as we stretch ourselves within the own source revenue space, there are also, legal technicalities around that then puts us in a difficult position. And finally, Chair, or members, you may have noticed that we have left out quite a number of areas that you are requesting us to comment on. The position that we took as council is to focus on the areas around devolution. Because even on matters of, for example, the position of official opposition, the position of prime cabinet and the likes, some of us belong to different formations that have already made presentations or will continue making presentations. So we really narrowed ourselves to around the issues of devolution. Yeah.
Wednesday. Cost of living.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
I just want to chip in on the issue of the 6 billion. And I want to explain it without going into one man, one vote, and 1 kilometer, because that wouldn't even agree as a council amongst ourselves. But as an accountant, and I know Honorable Ichungwa is an accountant, costs are of two types: fixed costs and variable costs. Before you can even start selling your first item, you will have incurred a level of fixed costs. And the basic equal share in the formula of the CRA formula of sharing was to take care of that fixed cost. So what we're actually asking is that basic equal share to be able to cover the basic equal fixed operating cost for all counties before we start getting into their variable cost of the number of staff and the number of dispensaries. So there are counties that are unable to operate or have any money for development because whatever they're getting doesn't cover that basic fixed cost of running a county. So what we're asking is, can we up the basic equal share to cover that cost for everybody? Then, I don't want to get to OSR, that has been well covered. The cost of living, together with the issues of office of the opposition leader and the office of the prime cabinet secretary and all those things, were things that we thought we don't have a common position on as a council. And usually what I tell people is that the council is neither an appendage of the national executive nor the official opposition. It's a bipartisan organization that brings together the governors of Kenya. So we discuss the things that unite us, not the ones that divide us. And that's why we just like discussing things to do with devolution. I ended there, Chair.
Okay, I think we need to stop at that point. Coach in golf will say well out. Well out, well out. If you don't mind, yes.
Chair, let me just tell my colleagues that you've done a good job for devolution. Thank you.
So it went according to script,
Clearly, because she seemed to know who should answer what question.
We had a pambana.
In all fairness, you've done very well, and we thank you for that. Your presentation will enrich our work as we move to the stage of report writing.
So maybe in our deliberations, Co-Chair, we should excuse Governor Sess that day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and the Council of Governors for your excellent presentation. And we will definitely consider all that you have said. You have given us invaluable inputs into many of the issues that we are considering. And a different perspective on a number of those issues, like the issue on delimitation of boundaries that Governor Makueni spoke about existing boundaries of counties that are yet to be resolved. So we thank you, na asanteni sana for taking your time. I was hoping on a light note now in closing that probably since you had your elections today, would have benefited as a country from knowing how you conduct your elections without so much acrimony. maybe we adopt that style for electing a president.
I'm telling you. Thank you, co-chairs. On behalf of my colleagues and the Council of Governors, would like to thank you for the opportunity that you have given us. And we are very hopeful that you will consider the proposals that we have made, especially in the advancement of devolution in Kenya. And yes, I think the country has a thing or two to learn from the Council of Governors on how they elect. And it would be, I think, a very progressive way of ensuring that we don't get into a situation where we even end up here with bipartisan talks trying to calm the country down. But thank you. On a light note, on behalf of my colleagues, and I'm sure all of us are happy that we've had a say or two on the matters that concern us. Okay. There's just one issue of a document that is inside there. I think we'll wait to be guided on a day, maybe the one on gender, the section that
That's fine, that's fine. It is here, it's documented. If we need more from you, we shall let you know.
All right, thank you very much.
They're telling me to clarify that the document in entirety is mostly by the G7, the women governors on the gender.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Members, I'll ask people to repeat as governors exit. And I hope there's no petition on the elections today. But maybe as you leave, to encourage you, this, and it's my personal view, not the view of the committee, to have at least a term of 2 years for a chair of the council instead of 1 year.
Too much. Too frequent.
Then the last 1 year, you can give it to a first-term governor who is likely to be re-elected.
And says, I hope we sent you to Majority Leader Ichungwa in our forum, so I hope you pass the message.
Okay. I think